Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagoshnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I am unable to form the words to describe how disappointed I am that Mark Davis decided to ruin my retirement plans. I had money tied up in the first coach fired. I thought that Chicago Bears, Eberflus, licensed to print money. How was I to know?
They were the first team that were definitely screwed by their coach, but one thing you didn't consider is that Davis's fire their coaches mid-season. Alice's don't.
Yeah, but you could get rid of Poles and Eberflus in one fell swoop.
You could.
It's obvious that the two of them should not be employed. So why
One
not?
Could argue that.
Apparently, what Eberflus should have done is walked in, dressed up like the owner, and apparently that's a billionaire's hot button, I guess.
Yeah.
That was the first thing I read. The first thing I read yesterday morning when I got out of bed was that. And I went, oh. It's not that I really wanted to return to Vegas, but I wanted to cash that in.
Yeah. That reminds me of $2 of vouchers I have to cash in next time I go back to Vegas.
It's just
$2.
I need my $2. No, that was the only thing I cared about. Was that? That's the only thing I cared about this year, and that I am Fortune's fool. Thanks, Vegas. Thanks, Vegas Raiders. Thank you, Mark Davis, for ruining my plans. And with that disappointment, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We have a lot to talk about. The Vikings traded for a quarterback. We'll get to that. We also have a preview of the Falcons game as well, so stick around, and the mailbag. But before we start, again, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. If you enjoy the show and would like to help us out financially, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and join there for $3.50 a month or a little less for the year subscription. You get access to the bonus materials. You get access to the Discord, all of that over at patreon.com/NorseCode. Special thank you to Corey Jason Gima, sure, and Chuck Rezak. And I forget if I mentioned it, but Sebastian Morales also has donated, depending on if I had mentioned that last episode. But thanking you guys so much for subscribing over on Patreon. Really do appreciate it. We can also go over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well if you'd like to give a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up any number of wreath items. I should get a couple of these to give away at the live show as well. I feel like a couple of Christmas socks thrown out to the crowd could make someone happy.
What?
Or we just throw them at Dusty.
Yeah, I like the idea of turning them into projectile weapons for sure. 100% on board.
This is
the idea of using them as a reward is a little bit concerning.
Yeah. Well, we'll give away a couple of things out there at the Damn Grill in Denver, Colorado, 7 p.m. November 17th. We'll be doing our live show there, the live taping of the preview of the Broncos game. So check it out there. Again, the Damn Grill. We are giving away 2 tickets to the game. So looking forward to that. The Damn Grill, 7 p.m. November 17th, likely starting the taping about 7:30. So come on out. We got free tickets. We've got a couple things that we'll be tossing out into the crowd, free merch or whatever. So check it out. And plus, I have a special gift to give to Arif. So I'm looking forward to this very much. A listener decided to provide you with what you've always needed, and I agreed.
Is it a car?
No, it is not.
Okay, then I can't imagine.
Look, there's no way that anyone's going to give you a car after this. Even the bank loan is going to be like, really?
Yeah. You've shown that you can't take care of it.
The cops took it the first time? That ain't right. No.
Why would the cops take it?
That's absurd. So, check us out, The Damn Grill, 7 p.m., November 17th. We started doing it on here. We've started talking about it online as well. Check it out. Let your friends know. Colorado, Denver. It'll be fun. Looking forward to seeing some of you guys out there and giving out some tickets. So
I swear to God, if it's an inflatable garage, I'm going to be so mad.
Why would I give you an inflatable garage?
You said it's something that a listener said I needed. I've been in our Discord. They all keep talking about getting me a garage. Well, not getting me, making sure I have one.
That's a whole other thing. There's a revolution going on in the Discord. I'm not a part of that either. This is outside of the silliness of the Discord. A listener wanted to make sure that you got this, and I looked at it and went, yes, absolutely, this is needed. So this is also my payback for the bingo shirt last year. So with that, let's get into the episode. Shortly after we recorded, a couple hours after the episode was released, Joshua Dobbs from the Cardinals, was traded to the Vikings, basically swapping a 6th and 7th round pick, and is the presumptive number 2 quarterback for the Vikings now.
Yeah. Not much really to add to that. It's kind of funny. I wrote a piece over at the Wildlife Substack, and I talked to a couple of people about it, but I also cribbed from the one video that JT O'Sullivan did on Dobbs against the Dallas Cowboys, which happened to be Joshua Dobbs' best game of the season. So it ended up being maybe not a representative sample of what to expect, but you ended up with, I think, a really good takeaway of who Josh Dobbs is as a quarterback. And then after I published that, JT releases another video, which, I mean, appropriate, like good move, on Joshua Dobbs in his Week 8 game. So, yeah, I just thought that was kind of funny. But I think that the takeaway here is primarily that Dobbs is a backup that plays like a starter, which is to say that the talent level that he demonstrates from an arm strength perspective, accuracy perspective, athleticism perspective, they're not really up to the standards of a lot of starting quarterbacks in the NFL, but he doesn't mind that fact. He doesn't seem remotely aware of that fact even. And so he ends up throwing a lot of tight window throws that he can't necessarily always do well with. He ends up creating or throwing into a lot of contested catches. He is actually fairly poised under pressure. That's kind of the benefit of somebody who seems to be like really ambitious about being a starter, which is great. But, he can get, a little bit confused by disguise. But for the most part is just, here's a guy that is he's above backup quality just because of that fact, because he'll take chances that you need to take. But he's not really starter quality. I think that in EPA, he ranks something like 26th, 27th or something when the Vikings traded for him. And when you look at kind of the quarterback rankings that, people like Derek Clausen or Stephen Ruiz over at The Ringer have, he ranks somewhere between like 24th and 28th or something along those lines. So borderline starter, if you're comfortable saying not all 32 quarterbacks are starting quality, that's kind of where he's been at. The benefit, of course, is that he's going to a place with a better offensive line, and when Jefferson comes back, a better receiving group. So maybe that can be kind of changed a little bit. I would also argue a better offensive play caller. So, maybe you can turn in a manageable offense. But yeah, I think that's it's going to be a while until the Vikings are probably confident enough to start him. And that, of course, is dependent, like you said, on Jaron Hall, who is the presumptive number 1. They named him the starter for this week. I suspect that if he plays at a reasonable-ish level, he will continue to be the starter unless Dobbs is just like phenomenal or something in practice. But they don't have a ton of like draft equity invested in him, so they're not going to feel obligated to play him if Hall is doing all right.
Yep, this is probably the best option they could have had, picking up a starter-ish number 2, and he's played in a number of places. Like he played in Cleveland. I believe he was drafted by the Steelers, and ended up playing a bit this year over in Arizona. So if nothing else, he is the backup who's had starter, like he's gotten like starting reps. He's literally started games out there. So you couldn't have asked for a better situation. Plus, it's not like the Vikings gave up much. So
Yeah, exactly. It was, a late round swap is pretty ideal in
yeah,
that context.
this is about as good as this was going to get. So I guess kudos to the Vikings for being able to pull that off. And also of note, as far as the trade deadline was concerned, is that Ezra Cleveland was traded.
Yeah, when he was traded, my first thought was that Chris Reed was coming back, and I should have tweeted it out because that would have looked a lot better. But I think I said it on a podcast. Certainly, I texted a couple of people who asked me about it. But it turns out, he was on the injury report as somebody who's practicing. So I think that played a role. The Vikings are pretty confident in the depth that they have. Chris Reed is not a tradable asset at this point. I think they like Blake Brandel more than the league does, so they don't want to trade him. And so you're basically asking, you know, do we want to have a high quality guard backup and not really know what to do with the guard room, as it were, the offensive line room? Or would we rather, get a day 3 pick, essentially get a pick back for Dobbs, um, and have the offensive line room figured out once Chris Reed comes back? Because then you've got the Blake Brandel at guard, Chris Reed at guard, Austin Schlottman at center, and whatever your plan is at tackle, I guess. I still think it should be Blake Brandel, but whatever. But you've got a lot of options available to you already with Chris Reed coming back. So kind of made sense. Obviously, Ezra Cleveland lost his job to Dalton Reisner after basically one game. But to me, Cleveland is an average-ish guard. And so from a price perspective, maybe not like the best. It's hard to get an average-ish guard for like what was it, a 6th round pick? But there was only 1 year left on his contract, and I don't think they would have been able to extend him. So get what you can. It's not that big a deal that the value maybe wasn't perfect to what I would have imagined. And if you want to be really optimistic about it, it's like they traded Ezra Cleveland for Joshua Dobbs, which to me is a good deal. So yeah, I mean, Cleveland played really well. I was talking to some Jaguars fans about him, and there's just some concerns about their left guard, Tyler Shatley. They've had a lot of injuries, so he wasn't supposed to start the season. I think it was Ben Barch, who's a Minnesota native. But one of the concerns is that Tyler Shatley is just not athletic enough to do all the things that they want to be able to do, both in the running game where it's really important, and even in the passing game. And Cleveland is definitely that. So it could end up being a win-win just because it enables the scheme for Jacksonville in a way that it didn't before. And the Vikings, don't really lose that much in terms of capital, especially because I think the pick that they trade, the pick that they got from Arizona is like a high 7th, because it's Arizona, right? So I think it's Arizona's original 7th, which is going to be a high 7th. And so the swap is the 6th and 7th swap is not going to be that big. What you get from Jacksonville is going to be a little bit better. So yeah, maybe not perfect price wise, but I think probably a net positive move regardless, just because it allows you to take advantage of the fact that your offensive line room is about to become overcrowded with players that you like.
So as far as the trade deadline is concerned, the Vikings didn't make a ton of moves, but they did make those 2 specific ones. Is this something that you think the Vikings should have addressed more, or is the team stuck in the situation of we're 500 and we have a chance to really make this, and so we feel pod committed to the season?
I just think that there's a dictate from the ownership, right? That your goal is to be as competitive as possible as long as possible. That's part of it. So they're always going to be kind of, I don't know if hamstrung's the right word, but they're going to be railroaded in one direction about the way that they need to build the team and the way that they respond. But also, I think that with a couple of players that you really want to retain in contract years, players like Justin Jefferson, players like Daniil Hunter, um, with those players, and I guess Kirk Cousins, I don't know. I think that you would be doing them a disservice by just attempting to punt on the season. And then also, you wouldn't really be making good on the team culture that you tried to successfully establish last year, but you're continuing to try to establish as a new coach if you just kind of give up on the season. So I think that that's part of it. But also, like, I don't know. It's just like there's a lot of people talk about tanking, and like I get it. Like logically, it's good, but that's not really how coaches and players and a lot of times front offices really work, despite kind of the evidence that we have from Brian Flores and the Miami Dolphins. I mean, the reason that got out was because it's kind of atypical of NFL coaching staffs. Because by the end of like maybe 6 years from now, when Kevin O'Connell is negotiating a new contract extension or something like that, he's going to look at or his agent is going to say, this guy's a 600 coach and you always pay 600 coaches or whatever, right? And if he loses some meaningless games, the agent's not going to say, well, he would have been a 600 coach, right? He's a 585 coach, but like if you no, that's not how that works. He's a 600 coach, right? I think that's part of it, is also that like you're always helping yourself by winning individually, even if the team itself is not helping by the wins, right? So I think that's part of it, is just that they want to stay as competitive as possible for as long as possible. Plus, you do get a look at Jaren Hall in NFL gameplay, and that could be valuable, even though that wasn't really the goal for him.
Yeah, but definitely not. And Cousins did get the surgery this week. Apparently, Aaron Rodgers has been talking to him, so that's
Great.
Wonderful news. I can't imagine what the two had to talk about outside of like the obvious like Achilles injury.
I'm sure that they swapped all kinds of medical knowledge back and forth for sure.
That's the only thing I can think of is just medical and nothing else. I would describe Kirk Cousins as a family man, and I don't think you could make the argument for Aaron Rodgers. So
don't have a ton in common in that area.
Not particularly. No.
Yeah, I'd say they probably read different books too.
Well, we'll ignore that for the moment and get into the preview of the Falcons game. So what we're going to do is go to an interview that Arif conducted earlier today with the Charles McDonald over at Yahoo. He is also the very same Charles McDonald who is the recipient of the world's greatest mac and cheese recipe. That is going to forever be that might as well as forever be in his byline.
Oh yeah,
he
loves it. He's proud of it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we have for you. So sit back, enjoy, and we'll see you after the mailbag.
All right, I'm here with Charles McDonald, a longtime friend of mine. Grew up on Draft Twitter together. He writes for Yahoo Sports and he podcasts for the Exempt List. And unfortunately, he is an Atlanta Falcons fan. What's up, man?
Nothing good. Like,
yeah.
As far as okay, like normal life is fine.
Okay,
it's good enough.
Yeah,
but I feel like
enough.
Good enough. But like I feel like I'm actively getting worse every Sunday that I sit around and watch this team, which I'm excited to do. Again, I'm back home in Charlotte right now. Hanging out with my grandma while my parents go celebrate their 31st anniversary. And I'm going to go to the Panthers-Colts game this weekend. And my plan is to go cover that game because I'm just trying to go to as many stadiums as I can and have the Falcons game up on a second screen. So I'll be watching Bryce Young versus Gardner Minshew in front of me in real life. And I'll be watching Taylor Heineke versus Jaren Hall on another screen. Just really enjoying my Sunday on a day that features Chiefs, Dolphins, Ravens, Seahawks, Bills, Bengals, and there's another one in the 4:00 window. I think it's Cowboys, Eagles, or something like that.
It's a good week of football.
It's a great week of football, and I'm going to be sitting at Panthers, Colts, giving you all the hottest news from Bryce Young's latest game.
Well, so you're trying to visit all the stadiums. What's your favorite stadium to visit so far?
Oh man. Okay. Well, that's all that's all just like based on spreads pretty much and how easy it is to get down to the locker room after a game. So I will say, in terms of spreads, Buffalo is amazing. Like the breakfast was amazing.
Yeah.
The food they had right after the game at halftime is good. After people go down to interview the players, when you come up, they have beer for you.
They have beer for you?
It's Blue Light, like their little local light beer.
I don't think I've been to a single stadium that off. Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah, I think I've seen that Jerry will do that on like Thanksgiving sometimes, but
Oh, yeah, that makes
outside of
sense.
that, I hadn't really heard of that. But the problem with Buffalo is like you legitimately need a map to get down from the press box to
Yeah.
where the locker room is. So that dings it a little bit. I think I would say in terms of just like the total package, Vegas is pretty good.
Yeah, Legion.
the food's
Yeah.
good. It's easy to get around. You know, it's all pretty uniform standard. So I would go Vegas as a total package. Buffalo has the best food. In terms of just getting around the stadium, I still think it's MetLife because it's so goddamn easy to just press a button to the elevator and you're right at the locker room.
Oh,
But that
yeah,
stadium
MetLife
has no
rules.
life. Yeah, but the
The,
food sucks. Like I
yeah, the
remember
food's,
when I
yeah,
was
the Jets might well, it depends on who's hosting, right? Because the Jets have the worst spread I've ever had. Like gas
yes,
station food. The Giants were fine.
yes. Yeah, okay. Well, I remember when I was covering the Giants and Jets for the Daily News back in the day. Uh, there was a Monday night game. It was either a Sunday night or a Monday night game where I was covering the Giants, and I came back for a Thursday night game that the Jets were playing, and I was like, "Yo, I ate this food like 3 days ago."
What happened?
It, it was the same exact food, and I talked to the cafeteria lady. I'm like, it was the same food. I was like, "Yo, like."
You
Don't
just
lie to me.
keep
I
it.
was here. I was here a few days ago. Like, is this the same food? And she was like, well, yeah, but it's reheated. I was like, I don't want
That's
reheated
not
nacho cheese from
She was like,
3 days
"Yeah,
ago.
but it's reheated."
Yeah, but it's reheated. I was like, okay,
I
okay,
think the best spread I
whatever.
had was 49ers. That was for a playoff game though. I don't know if they like pulled out all the stops, but that was like they had like these huge Belgian waffles. They had prime rib with horseradish sauce. They sliced it up for you. Just insane stuff. They had an incredible breakfast taco. Actually good omelets. I feel like most stadiums that offer eggs kind of screw them up, which fair enough, they
Yeah,
should do. But yeah. Yeah, the
yeah.
49ers were fantastic. The locker room situation, getting in the building sucked. Getting to the locker room was fine, but finding the press entrance was hellacious. I hated that.
Yeah, yeah. But we'll get to add another one to the stop. I haven't been to Bank of America. I haven't been to Bank of America Stadium since I was a kid, and I was with my mom's cousin's husband. We went to go see. Uh, like this is back when Michael Vick was, still a
Mhm.
Falcons quarterback, and we were just heckling Panthers fans, and almost got into a fight in the street later. And I was just like,
Yep.
"Damn, this is awesome! I love
Yeah,
the
this rules.
Falcons." And
Yeah.
now look at
I
me.
was going to ask why you became a Falcons fan. Is it Vic?
Well, yeah, I mean, so basically all of my mom's side of the family is from Georgia. Um, and I was born in Decatur, outside Atlanta, but I didn't live
Okay.
there very long. But still, like, it's funny because my first favorite team actually ever was the 2000 Baltimore Ravens, which was a great team to kind of fall in love with the
Right. Yeah.
sport with. And then Michael Vick got drafted the next year. We went down to a game, and it was the coolest shit I'd ever seen in my whole life. So
Yeah. All
I
in.
was
Yeah.
locked in on that. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine being 8 years old and seeing Michael Vick play? Like
Yeah.
it's
No, I get. Yeah. Yeah.
spiritual like experience for me.
I mean, the first football game I ever saw was '98 Randy Moss. So I get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like you just
Uh,
see something like that when you're that young, and you're like, oh, okay, this is
Yeah. I'm
my
in.
team.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
done. Yeah.
and then Vic goes to jail, and you only spend 1 year in quarterback purgatory. You get Matt Ryan in 2008. He throws it's like a 70-yard touchdown on his first pass, and now we're here with Taylor Heineke versus Jalen Hall.
Just worse off
Head,
for
head,
it. Yeah.
yeah, headlining the weekend. And the worst part is I can't even like not pay attention to the Falcons because they're still in first place in the division. So like they could still easily
That's
pretty
so
much make the
stupid.
playoffs with how terrible
When
this
was the
is going
last
for
time
them.
the NFC South wasn't like stupid?
Stupid in like a good way or just
No,
like
like in a
generally
bad way.
stupid.
Like just like it's annoying to follow.
Man, I mean I've found it annoying every time like the Saints would they would win like 13 games and then just have a comically bad playoff loss, but I couldn't laugh too hard because that happened to the Falcons a lot. Like from
Yeah.
like basically like the early Matt Ryan years, you're winning like 10 to 13 games every single year, and you're just finding the worst ways to lose in the playoffs. And then that one game happened that kind of
Yeah,
ruined
right. Yeah.
everything for
Yeah,
everybody,
we don't
and
got it. Yeah.
we still haven't recovered from that as a fan base or an organization. I think if we're going to be real, like if you, I've talked to a couple players. This game was that Super Bowl was 7 years ago now. I've talked to a couple players. They're like, dude, never going to get over that for the rest of my life. I was like, I
Wait, how
totally
many
understand
players
that.
are still on the roster that remember that were there?
Oh, none. No, none. But I mean, it's been. Well, actually, no. There's two players left. Jake Matthews and Grady Jarrett are the
Yeah, I
two
was about to
players
say
left
Grady
from that
Jarrett still.
roster.
Yeah, but he's on
Um,
IR, so he's not real.
yeah, but even Devonta Freeman was tweeting the other day. He was like, "Y'all really want to know what happened when I missed that block on Dante Hightower?" I was like, "No, dude. Like, honestly,
No,
I don't.
Why'd you bring
I'm
this
so
up?
yeah, I'm so good on that. Like, I know it's probably a sore spot for you because that was a pretty big play in that game. But no, I don't really want to know what happened. I can see it with my own eyes. You missed a block. We fumbled the ball. Lost
I can't imagine something happening and then 8 years later I'm like out here tweeting that it wasn't my fault. That's so down, dude.
it. Right.
That's bad.
But then they never sniff anything close to that. So I kind of get why he's
Okay, yeah,
there.
no, yeah. That's fair. Well, let's talk about probably a psychologically healthier but much worse team, the current Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, psychologically healthier is the way to put it.
Well, it's they suck to watch, but like you're not expecting much going in, right? So you can't get that hurt.
No.
Yeah.
It's not like watching, like the peak Matt Ryan years where you're kind of expecting something. I would
Yeah.
say next year is a year where I'll really be like, all right, like it's not just making the playoffs. Like we kind of gotta look like something. Because what I will say is about like the current Arthur Smith and Terry Fontenot regime is ownership is looking at this as like year one for them.
What?
Yeah, because they had so much dead cap space over the past 2 years that they weren't even really able to build a roster. Because even if you go back to last year for 2022, they had $85 million worth of dead cap from the moves that they had to get out of for the Thomas Dimitroff years. And even the year before that, like they were dealing with Julio's dead cap. In 2022, they're dealing with Matt and Julio's dead cap, plus Deion Jones, plus Dante Fowler. So like there's just a 2 year stretch where the only free agents that they were able to sign were just guys like, Fabian Moreau, or who's the old Titans linebacker, Rashawn Evans, like guys just 1 year deals. They don't even have the money to sign people long-term deals until this offseason. So like people who think that Arthur Smith and Terry are on the hot seat, not even remotely close, because they, this is the first year that they actually had access to money. And I think it's especially on defense, it's a pretty significant step forward on that side of the ball.
Now. The defense was already garbage last year. The defense is like good now. So
yeah, so I'm willing to give this another offseason just to see like what kind of moves they can make, what players they can add. But next year, I think is a year where the seed starts to get hot. And I will say, I think the seed would have been hot this year if they hadn't won like 14 games without access to any free agency money. So that kind of kept them going along like, oh, wow, like you didn't actually totally bottom out. And now I'm looking at it, I was like, maybe you should have just bottomed out.
Maybe
you should have. Just like, yeah, you bungled the Matt Ryan stuff because you were about to trade for Deshaun Watson. And that's a whole nother situation where I'm looking like, holy crap, this could have been so much worse. But luckily the Cleveland Browns saved them. But you bungled that relationship with Matt Ryan. And I think right there you could have made the decision, screw it. Let's just blow this season. But they decided to go get Marcus Mariota. You go 7-10 again, 8th pick, Bijan Robinson, and here we are with Desmond Ridder getting benched after 8 games.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about Arthur Smith, because there's like this whole thing about like the only people that don't understand it are fantasy guys, right? Where the guys are not getting enough targets or carries or whatever. But I mean, it does feel dumb, right? Just I don't care about fantasy. It feels like Arthur Smith isn't doing it right on offense. Like, can you explain kind of why we're not seeing the targets and touches to the players that matter?
It's weird because like when you look at, if you just look at like their percentage of like who's receiving the targets, it's still largely like Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan, with this year a weird amount of Jonnu Smith in there, which I think has been, for a tight end too, he's been solid, but still would like to see some of that cut down just a little bit. I think. Honestly, I think part of it this year is one, like Ridder it's frustrating because I really do think that he, like from the first game this season to up until last week, I thought he had taken significant strides as like just a passer of the football, but the ball security is so damn bad. And yeah, I think another issue for them is, and this is something that I didn't really anticipate because Arthur Smith was so good there in Tennessee, is they've been fine like in between the 20s or up until they get to the red zone. But as soon as they get to the red zone, they turn into like the worst offense in football, whether it's just not being able to get into get into the end zone, or you're turning the ball over, or you end up selling for field goals. It's like, man, like you can move the ball and get down the field, but when it's time to actually punch the ball into the end zone, you kind of got nothing for me. And that's the part that I've been a little bit concerned with and surprised with for Arthur Smith. But man, it's just I sometimes I think people forget that this was like a very hardcore rebuilding process that they had to undergo through, where you're just kind of trying to find like band-aids you can just slap on slap on holes that are leaking open from the Thomas Dimitroff and the end of the Dan Quinn years. So I think that this is still very much a work in progress, but man, it just sucks to see. Like, I feel very confident in saying that Kyle Pitts, even though I don't think he's fully recovered from that knee injury yet, but he's still like getting better each week. Kyle Pitts, Drake London, Bijan Robinson. I feel very comfortable saying those are all three very good football players. And then you look at the production, and it's like, damn, like what the hell is going on here? And the worst part for me is like, I'm usually like a film guy first, and I'll go back and I'll kind of try and fill in the gaps with the data, or sometimes I'll do it that way. But I think the film has to be a huge part of what you do. And I'm watching these games, I'm like, dude, this offense, like the structure of it is still largely fine to me. Like there's guys that are open, there's plays to be made. Sometimes there's just like, a little slip up here where someone will miss a block, or you run the wrong way and it kills a play, or Desmond Ritter will choose a wrong read and, he'll leave someone wide open that he could have thrown the ball to. There's drops. I mean, it's very frustrating. But when I watch the film, I'm like, dude, there's a good offense somewhere in here. Like, I saw it last year at times where, they were able to score 28 points on the 49ers with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. And then this year, it's nothing. So I would like to say, if they are serious about getting a quarterback next year, in terms of trading for one, or maybe even signing Kirk Cousins after the season, which would be kind of a risk now that he's torn his Achilles, but still better than what you have. I still think there's a place where this offense can get to what people are expecting it to look like. It's just kind of like a calamity of errors, and the offense is really young. You're starting, Matthew Bergeron at left guard, who's a rookie. Drew Dahlman, he's a young center. Bijan, Kyle Pitts, Rick London, they're young players. Ritter's a young player. So part of it is youth and growth. But I will say I don't really like how Arthur handles the media, even though I find him agreeing with him sometimes. Like the fantasy football stuff, okay, like I get it to a degree. I'll say this: I got it the first time, but every time after that, like you can't sit up here and say, well, if someone says to you, hey, I think getting Drake London and Kyle Pitts and Bijan Robinson the football more is a good idea, you can't really say, it's kind of hard to ridicule that person, right? You spent the 8th overall pick on Bijan and Drake London, the 4th overall pick on Kyle Pitts. Like I said before, I've seen them enough to feel like they are confirmed good NFL players, but we're just kind of, we're stuck in the mud here a little bit. So next year, I think, is when the seat gets top, I think.
Cool. Well, let's. So you talked a little bit about how like some of this issues with like Desmond Ritter, and I know he's not starting this week. It's Taylor Heineke. We'll talk about him in a second. But like, what is the primary issue with Ritter? Right? Like, is it because I know that he had a high completion percentage at Cincinnati, but nobody regarded him as an accurate quarterback because where that ball placement was. What is his anticipation? What's the whole deal?
Right now, it's turnovers. I think turnovers is just it's the biggest thing. And to me, it's like, it's the worst kind of turnovers where it's fumbles recently, like in recent weeks. Because I think earlier in the season, I was pretty concerned about his ability to throw the ball. You go to that Carolina game, it's some shaky stuff. Luckily, Bryce Young was so bad in that game, they didn't need Ritter to do anything, and they were set up by short fields. Then you go to the Packers game that they won, right, in week 2, he easily could have thrown 3 or 4 interceptions in that game. But, I think since then, the passing's been fine, but then the fumbling just got cranked up to a level that honestly you couldn't tolerate, even though he was making strides as a passer. So, like, you go to the Tampa Bay game, I think he had 2 fumbles that I would charge to him. He got, credited with 3. The worst one was, Arthur calls a great play. It's a read option. The end zone's wide open. He's got to run like 10 yards, and he's holding the ball in the wrong hand and gets tackled by Antoine Winfield at the 1-yard line, and the ball fumbles through the end zone, and it's a touchback. And then you have there's another play in that game
that's
where
your favorite rule.
Well, but this is why I like the rule. Hold the ball into the end
that's
zone.
Your favorite rule. Yeah, no, you like the rule. Yeah.
I'm not even though it worked against me, I still think it's a good rule. And then you had there's another fumble in that game where he got blitzed like right before halftime and sacked and fumbled the ball. But the one that wasn't on him, I would say, was Drew Dahlman. One time he snapped the ball. It was an under center snap. It was really weird, and the ball just didn't go far enough. It was one of the first times I've seen like an under center snap not reach the quarterback's hands, and it just kind of fell in the ball, and the Bucs recovered it. And then, you get into the Titans game, and he fumbles again. And I think at that point, you're looking at 7 fumbles in the past 2.5 games. You're like, okay, we got to call a timeout on this, because it doesn't matter if you're improving on throwing the ball, because even in that Bucs game, he averaged like 10 yards an attempt on 70-something% completion percentage. But you're not scoring because you're not holding on to the ball through the end zone. And at some point, it just gets to a point where you can't really tolerate that. And I think that's what led to his benching. But like the anticipation and the accuracy, I think there's been like some real growth there since the start of the season. But you can't play if you can't hold on to the ball.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Well, let's talk about Taylor Heineke for a little bit. So I was telling you before the show that I found it weird that he focuses so much on footwear. So for people who are unfamiliar, Taylor Heineke buys a shoe in the colorway that matches the team's colors of the team that he just beat after a win. He also just buys a ton of shoes anyway. He has like a $20,000 collection of Jordans.
Wow!
But like
goals,
right? So he buys like these shoes in the color, and I was saying that if I were him, I would not focus so much on footwear because of what it emphasizes. And apparently you hadn't heard the story, so I'm just telling it to you for the first time now. You might remember it once I tell it to you. But so he was set to be the Vikings' backup quarterback the year that Teddy went down, but before Teddy had ever got down, so 2016. So before Teddy had ever gotten injured, Taylor showed up to camp with a walking boot on, and we were like, "What the hell? This undrafted free agent did so well last year in preseason, was going to be quarterback too. So like, what's going on?" And we found out later that he tore a bunch of ligaments in his leg by kicking his foot through a glass door that was locked.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so I would not like bring attention to my feet if I were him.
No, that reminds me. Have I ever told you about how my high school football career ended?
No.
Okay, so it's related to foot injuries. I was healthy during all this, but so the last 2 games of the season, right, were against the same team, or 2 of the last 3 games of the season were against the same team, because we played them once to try to get to the playoffs, or not to get to playoffs, because we had the playoffs seed locked up, but to host the first ever home night playoff game in our school's history. Mm-hmm. And we get down to the 5-yard line. We're down by 4. We're down by 4 or 5, so we needed a touchdown. It's the last drive of the game. My coach calls a wide receiver screen to just try and, just punch it into the end zone, create some space. We were a 10 personnel spread offense. We threw almost every single play. It was a lot of fun. We get down to, the 5-10-yard line, clock's running, and we call a screen, right? My friend who played wide receiver didn't think that the screen was going to work. He was called to catch the ball in this play. So he runs a slant instead without telling anybody.
What?
Yes. So he runs a slant. And when our quarterback looks over. There's no one there to catch the screen. I'm running
Yeah.
over to block. There's no one there that I'm supposed to block for. And I see him, running towards the end zone without the ball in his hand. So then our quarterback, he panics and, he just kind of throws the ball up into the air and it was intercepted. And, that was the end of that. But we played the same game. We played the same team in the playoffs at their spot. But where the foot injury part comes in is our starting kicker hurt his foot at a party the week before the playoff game. No. So we call up a kid from the soccer team who had never kicked football in his life. And we're throughout the week of practice. Everything's fine. Honestly, he made some pretty big field goals in practice. So we thought we were okay. We get down to the end of the game. We're down by 2. We had a 30, 35-yard field goal. And we sent him out there to try and kick the game-winning field goal. The ball was so low, it almost hit the long snapper in the back of the head.
What?
The ball barely made it up off the ground. Understandable. Your first real high school football kick was going to be to go to the championship game for our conference. And I would say the ball traveled 6 yards past the line of scrimmage before it just kind of bounced across the ground. And they put a picture of my friend sobbing on the field in the Baltimore Sun. So that's how I remember. Yeah, dude, he had his jersey up over his eyes, and you can see his mouth just open through the jersey, just sobbing. And they put that in the Baltimore Sun. McDonald loses a heartbreaker to Calvert Hall off a missed field goal. It's missed field goal, that's even strong because it didn't even travel far enough to route even call it. It was close to
generous to the attempt. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my whenever I hear people talk about foot injuries in football, I'm oh gosh, that was 11 years ago. I'm still a little salty about it.
Do you ever take that picture and send it to your friends in a group chat to roast him?
No, he ended up being a Trump supporter, so I don't really talk anymore.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. I would send it even more then, but I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Taylor Heineke, the quarterback.
Yeah, back to the real
the other Trump
stuff.
supporter. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taylor Heineke. Yeah. What's his deal? What's his game? Are you confident?
Okay. I don't think he did anything that Ritter hasn't done in the second half of that game. So yeah, it was nice to see them be able to move the ball. And honestly, when I was watching the game on broadcast, I'm see, this is where I know I'm not going crazy, that the structure of the offense is still okay because there's just wide open windows that he's throwing to, and he's just kind of making it look a little bit easier because maybe he's a vet. But I don't really have confidence that, let's say you start him for, there's 8 games left in the season? 9? Mm-hmm. You start him for the rest of the season? How different does that totally end up looking from Desmond Ritter? I think the people in the Falcons fan base who are this is going to solve our problems. No, it's just something different for now. I think it's mostly just out of fairness to the other players who are not turning the ball over at such an insane rate to kind of give them this stability at quarterback. But I wouldn't say I'm super excited about this. I just think that it was time to make the switch because you can't turn the ball over as much as they have been. And I think, some of the inexperience that Desmond Ritter had was showing up in some of the sacks he was taking too. So, you put Heineke in, we'll see what happens after the bye, after these next couple games. But I don't really feel excited about this. Honestly, I just want someone who can come in here and run the offense. If he's that guy for this year, that's fine. But, you can't go back into 2024 with your quarterbacks being Desmond Ritter and Taylor Heineke, even if Heineke plays well this year.
Fair enough. Yeah. So, I mean, you see the blitz heavy Vikings defense, right? That's all they do. And you see
they're min-maxing.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
Gamer turn. Yeah, because I feel all they do is blitz and play drop 8. It's one of those two.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they rarely rush 4, right? It's 3 or 6.
It's literally how I play Madden. We're playing 3 or 6. If it's empty and if it's empty, we're never sending 4. We're sending 3 or 6. Either we're gonna have more rushers than you have blockers, we're going to flood the field with coverage. And I think, both of those present their different issues, but I love how extreme the styles of play that they're dabbling with there are. We don't need to rush 4. We'll rush 3, or we'll just blow up the pocket. And then
There's
I can respect
no
that
rule
as a
says you got to rush
philosophy.
4. Yeah, I get it.
Right.
Well,
Yeah.
so I mean, you see that, and you see Taylor Heineke's style of play, you see his history of play. Like, do you think that there's any particular concern about, or is it just like it's just another defense, or do you think that there's like something unique about facing a defense that blitzes like some 55-60%, something absurd like that?
I'm more concerned from like an offensive line perspective because like the Falcons' offensive line is they have like spurts where they look good, but they also have like some real goof moments, especially between like Matt Bergeron and Drew Dahlman, some of the younger guys up front, where they can get a little bit mixed up sometimes, or just kind of lose against some of the more powerful players. I'm still in on Bergeron. I think he's a guy who's played left tackle last year. He's playing guard for the first time as an NFL rookie.
Was
I
Matt
like.
Hennessy supposed to start?
Yeah, I think he was, but I don't know if he was actually. I let me say this: I've seen enough of Matt Hennessy. Is like the nice way to put it. It was just kind of time to replace that. So I think even if he didn't get hurt, he was going to get replaced fairly early in the year. So we kind of ended up where we were going to anyways. And Drew Dahlman is one of those guys where it's like, dude, if you could just take like a cycle of HGH and keep that underneath the table, you could be like a top 5 center because he's got all the movement skills, all the athleticism that you would want for a team that, likes to pull their center from time to time and do like wind back runs with him. But he's like 290 on a good day, I would say. And that causes some struggles for him. So I think like when you get into a matchup like against a team that's going to blitz a lot, that's where I get a little bit concerned. And then when you're inviting pressure to whether it's Ritter or Heineke, that's not really a situation that I feel super comfortable in. So, the offensive line, like they're going to have to be on their point. They've like even outside the offensive line, like you've had some miscues and blockings with the tight ends and the running backs, and it's just been, it's been like a mixture of youth and just, you're not quite there yet, I think, in terms of the talent level that you want. But, they're just still trying to figure this thing out. Slowly but surely trying to figure this thing out.
They made like a huge deal after, because I didn't think they were going to be able to keep Chris Lindstrom. And I think did Caleb McGarry hit free agency at the same time?
Yes.
Yeah,
Caleb got like one of those funny money 3-year deals that you can cut after one.
Okay, yeah, because they did make a big deal about like returning everybody when nobody thought that they would be able to. They've got all 5 starters or whatever, which they don't because Matt Hennessy's gone. But
yeah,
but like they made a huge deal of it. They're like ranked 25th in pass block win rate or whatever.
Yeah, because I thought the offensive line, like by the end of last year, was actually like a pretty good unit, and it's like they reset to 0 when they came back this year. Caleb McGarry has not been nearly as effective as he was last year. Even his effectiveness last year kind of got overstated because he wasn't really a guy that you wanted to leave like in one-on-one situations and pass blocking, but the run blocking was good enough, and he had developed like enough skill there where you were kind of okay bringing him back. But even with the deal that they brought him back on, you can see like where they kind of protect himself. Like it wasn't the Chris Lindstrom deal where you're just like, okay, you were locked in as one of the best guards in football. You've become what, Thomas Dimitroff drafted you to be. You're locked in. With Caleb McGarry, like his dead cap hit for the 2024 season is $9.5 million. So like if they want to move on from that, that's not a difficult contract to move like at all. And they would even get some cap relief for that. So I think he's in a little bit of danger if he doesn't pick this thing up. But I am still also surprised that his play has fallen off in the way that it has, because it's like the same setup. You're in the same offense, same offensive line coach. You're working with the same running backs outside of Bijan from last year, but for some reason it just hasn't been as crisp or as clean. So hopefully they can get that thing moving back in the back half of the season, because as crappy and as shaky as this team has looked, like they still control their own destiny as far as making the playoffs go.
It's so dumb.
It's so dumb. And also, dude, you know what I realized this week?
Hmm.
we're probably going to get multiple NFC South teams in the playoffs.
What? Wait, what's happening in the NFC? Okay, so I have not paid enough attention to like
Okay,
wild card.
Minnesota. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. Then we have Washington. They just traded. I'm talking about the other teams competing for like that
Yeah.
4 and 7 spot. So
Yeah.
right now the Falcons are leading the NFC South, which would give them the 4 seed. The Vikings are currently in the 7 seed. I
Yeah,
would
but that's
expect
not.
that to
Yeah.
fall.
Yeah.
The 8 and 9 seeds are the Saints and the Buccaneers.
Oh
The
my
10
God.
seed is the 10 seed is the Rams. Matthew Stafford just got hurt. The 11 seed Commanders. They just traded both their starting defensive end. And then you're getting to the Packers, Giants, Bears, Panthers, Cardinals.
Oh yeah, I don't have
Like,
any confidence in them. Okay, yeah, fair enough.
right. So like we could get the
Oh,
NFC South winner plus another NFC South team in the
'cause
NFC
I
playoffs.
was about to tell you not to fall for like the Baker Mayfield stuff because he only looked good for like 2 weeks, but then you just listed off every other team, and I was like, yeah, you know what, you're right.
That's what I'm saying. Like the Saints, like they could defense their way into the 7 seed or even win the division because they still haven't played the Falcons yet. It's like we need to reshuffle these divisions, these conferences. Is what's going on here.
This is bad.
Like the Bengals are the 9th seed in the AFC. That's crazy.
Well, okay, but like Joe
That's
Burrow
their
was
fault.
playing without hamstrings for a while. That's not really.
Yeah. But still, like
Yeah,
you look
no,
at the quality of like the potential 7 seed teams versus in the AFC versus NFC. This is
Yeah, that's
kind of
crazy.
crazy. And I don't even think anyone is wrong for saying the NFC South is like the worst division in football, but they still might have 2 playoff teams, which is absolutely hilarious.
That's funny. Well, let's talk a little bit about that running back situation, right? So everyone, kind of clown on the Falcons for drafting Bijan when Tyler Algier was in the running for like offensive rookie of the year. Wasn't going to get it, but one of those in the running kind of things. They're able to cobble together a really good running game regardless, right? They also have speaking of former, there's a ton of former Vikings on this offense, by the way. There's Cordell Patterson, there's Taylor Heineke, there's Storm Norton, Kyle Hinton,
Pruitt.
at least Michael Pruitt. What's that?
Yeah, Michael Pruitt.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot.
Yeah. But yeah, Cordell Patterson was doing pretty well. Like when they had red zone success last year, like some of that was CPAT, right? So like, I know you love Bijan, and I know that you think that GMs should just draft like good players generally and not like worry about.
Yeah, I wasn't. I will say I wasn't a fan of the Bijan pick, even though I think he's an outstanding player. Like I think he's like a huge plus for their offense most weeks, but like it hasn't really improved like the scoring output all that much. And I think what's to me what's frustrating about like the season that Bijan is having is, they when they drafted him, they said, this is going to be part of our like positionless football plan, blah 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 blah.
That never happens, man.
It never really works out. Although I will say, like, I thought that this offense kind of had a chance to maybe try some of that because, Kyle Pitts, he can play tight end and outside. You have Bijan, who in theory could play like some slot receiver and running back. You have Cordero Patterson, who actually has like split time at both over the years. And early on in the Arthur Smith stuff, like there were some games where he just straight up played wide receiver when Matt Ryan was still here. So like there was some room to think about that as a possibility for them. But the truth of the matter is, like, I think they overrated like how good Bijan is as just like a flat out receiver. Not in terms of like what he's able to do when he gets the ball in his hands, but like just being a receiver and running routes and feeling out of defense and stuff like that. That part of their evaluation probably got overstated. I mean, one of something that they keep trying to do that they haven't been able to get to pop off yet is they really want to be able to run like option routes with Bijan. But he just doesn't have a great feel for where he needs to be, what route he needs to run, the timing on when he needs to turn back and look at the quarterback. And they've also tried to get some wheel routes to pop off, and the ball skills, man, they're just not there. Like it's like, if sometimes it feels like if I just kind of went out there and started throwing passes to someone who hadn't caught a lot of footballs before, it would start to look like that, where he's jumping when he could just keep running and let the ball fall underneath his hands. So like I see like the vision, but it's just not quite there yet. And I think that that's been a little bit of a hamper on how they've been using him, because honestly, the way they should be using him right now is just stick him back there at running back, give him 20 plus carries a game, and then whatever else you get on the side is kind of gravy, because he is really like supremely talented as a running back. But I think they've gotten a little bit too expansive with what they want his role to be for his rookie year.
Dude, he's a highlight monster though. Like his highlights are incredible.
Yeah, yeah.
Love
I
that.
mean, he's outside of the Tampa Bay fiasco. I think he's only really had 2 games where it wasn't really working out for him. 'Cause even the Tennessee game last week, he had a pretty good game, but he only had 11 carries. I'm like, come on, man, like this is where Arthur, like this is where people start to question you. Like the easy one, I can understand games where Kyle Pitts or Drake London have quiet games because receiving relies on a little bit more than just getting open. But Bijan, like, dude, that's you, Arthur. Just give him the ball more. Like,
Yeah,
just line him
yeah.
back up there and give him the ball. And the crazy thing is, like, on the ground, like, just as far as his scheme fit goes with their running style, it's a perfect fit. But he's just not racking up the carries that you would hope that he would get. I don't know if they're like trying to save him for his rookie year or whatever until they feel more confident in the quarterback situation. But man, I would be trying to do anything to get this offense going. And I think that that's the easiest path.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the receiver situation. First, I have no idea if Drake London's going to play. The injury report was just released. He's DNP for groin, which sucks. I think Drake London's like really good. I think no one talks about him, but they did trade for like Van Jefferson. They have I'm trying.
Yeah.
They've got Mac Hollins. They've got Kadero Hodge. They've got Scotty Miller. I know Kyle Pitts is there, but it just feels like this is not a receiving core without Drake London.
No, it's not. And this was like one of the things I was concerned about coming into the year, where people are like, "Oh, the Falcons' offense is great. It's talented." I'm like, "Yeah, it's talented, but it's razor thin. Like if you start losing guys, there's not a whole lot else here." So, they traded for Van Jefferson, who dropped the wide open 4th down pass to end the game last week. You have Matt Collins, who isn't really doing too much outside of like blocking and maybe the occasional like intermediate pass. Like the 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 best way for them to kind of get moving on offense through wide receivers is through Drake London. If they don't have that, it gets kind of spooky pretty fast, because then you're kind of relying on like Cordero Hodges to Cordero Hodges to come in and make a big play every once in a while. Like I said, Van Jefferson, who was an outcast for the Rams, is just it's not great. Like if you look at just their receiving stats this year, and you take out Kyle Pitts and Johnny Smith, who are the second and third leading receivers on the team behind Drake London, Matt Collins is the 4th leading receiver on the team with 211 yards this year.
Jesus.
Of their 6 leading receivers in terms of just yardage, only 3 of them are receivers. Drake London, Matt Collins, Kadero Hodge has 8 catches this year. So this is still an offense that wants to be moved through the tight ends and the running backs, but when you don't have Drake London, I think that gets significantly harder than the game that they've been trying to play over the past few weeks.
Before we move to the defense real quick, so Kyle Pitts, you've been saying a couple of times, he's like good, he's confirmed good, he's been having like he's had a good year on film, I guess is the best way to put it, but like what is the discrepancy just, the Desmond Ridder, or like why are we not getting a bunch of Kyle Pitts hype down the pipeline given where he came from and what his skill set is?
It's interesting. I don't really have a great answer for that, honestly. I think sometimes like the Falcons can be, a little run heavy to a fault. Like where you look at like the percentage of targets that are being allocated towards these guys, and you're like, wow, like that makes sense. And then you look at the actual number of targets that they're getting, and you're like, okay, you should probably like increase your passing a little bit more in some of these games. But I also think there's an element of Kyle Pitts where he's not fully healed from that knee injury. Like I still don't think he looks as explosive as he did to start the season last year. Like when he had that game versus Seattle, and he looked like goddamn Megatron out there. He's still not moving at that level, but it's just I don't really have a great answer for the Kyle Pitts stuff because like when I watch him play and I watch him move, like he's still getting open even if he's not moving as fast as he was before. Sometimes it's turned down, sometimes targets are uncatchable, sometimes he drops a pass. But then you see a game like he had a couple weeks ago against the Texans where it's like, okay, like this is still in you. And even against Washington, like he had a really crazy touchdown catch at the back of the end zone that Desmond Ridder threw a nice ball on. It's like you still see like the flashes and the talent, and I think it's still there. But it's kind of like the story of this whole offense. Like there's just something wrong on enough plays per game where you're not getting the full experience that you're hoping for. Because even with Ritter, I thought he made some pretty tough catches that maybe if it didn't pop up for big yards, but you still haven't seen like the rookie Kyle Pitts and some of the early season stuff from last year from Kyle Pitts, where he looks like legitimately one of the most talented talented pass catching guys in the whole game. Like that guy hasn't really been back yet, and at this point, I'm kind of wondering if it's like, all right, like if you're just gonna steadily be getting more explosive week after week after week off that knee injury that you had last year, is this just like a 2024 thing where we see the best of you, or is Taylor Heineke the best spot for you because he can run the offense a little bit cleaner? We'll see, but it's just hard for me to kind of say, a guy who had that rookie season he turned 21 during his rookie season. Like he just turned 23 years old last month. Right. Like, so he's still very much a baby as far as like his NFL career goes. It's hard for me to just kind of give up on everything that I've seen. So look, I'm dying on this Kyle Pitts hill as long as he's a Falcon, and probably even past that, because I've seen enough of him to know that like he can really do this at a high level, but I think for a multitude of reasons just not clicking quite just yet.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's talk about the defense. The defense is good. I didn't expect any of that going into the season, despite how many players that they brought in. They're like third in the NFL in success rate, which is crazy to me. Dropback success rate, they're sixth. Rush EPA allowed their first. Rush success rate, they're ninth. The only thing is that the dropback EPA and total EPA are like 14th or something like that, which to me suggests that they do well from down to down, but they can get caught on explosive plays from time to time. That's what this looks like to me, just reading the numbers.
That's exactly what happened last week with the Will Levis stuff. Because I think what's interesting, like if you go back to Will Levis's game and you just look at some of the stats, like I think he finished the game with like a 60 QBR, which is above average, but it doesn't really reflect throwing like 4 touchdowns on like 28 attempts. And like a lot of that was like they're kind of, moving the ball, just you first down, second down, you get the third down into conversion. Next thing you know, there's like a 40-yard touchdown on your head. And I will say that I think that has been a little bit, like that game was a little bit uncharacteristic for the Falcons defense this year because they've had pretty good coverage in the back end. There hasn't been too many explosive plays like that, at least not all in one game like we saw with Will Levis and DeAndre Hopkins last week. So I'm not really concerned about that. I think sometimes where like the discrepancy happens, like where they start going from being a great down to down defense to one that can get gashed, is the pass rush is not there yet. And then they lost Grady Jarrett this weekend for an ACL injury for the rest of the year. So it's like, all right, we're playing great. Like we can get you to third down, but sometimes we struggle getting off the field on third down. And even though like, I think their third down numbers are even still pretty good this year. So like this is more, anecdotal and, visual evidence more so than anything, but they just don't quite have the horses up front, especially on the edge, to just kind of close out some of these drives where you're like, man, like you're getting 3rd and 5, you're getting them in 3rd and long sometimes, and you still get beat because you don't really have anyone that can get home. They traded for Kentavious Street this week. I kind of like that move just as far as, a guy that has some juice as a pass rusher, but he's not good.
State guy?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. That was a crazy.
You're like a 4'8" or 280.
Yeah. Wow. Jesus.
I watched some
crazy
of the
defensive line. Yeah.
yeah. Crazy.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that pass rush. So they drafted Zach Harrison, right? They have Calais Campbell. But I feel like, and they signed David Onyemata, which I thought was a pretty decent move. But it feels like they're just not getting a lot out of the other edge rushers, whether it's like Bud Dupree, who wasn't meant to be, premier guy, the second round Penn State guy, Ebiketie, Lorenzo Carter, who I think they got from the Giants or was like waived from the Giants, and then D'Angelo Malone, who I think was he Houston or one of those Texas schools?
Um, I don't think
He was a third round draft pick from like 2 years ago.
Yeah, I
West Kentucky.
West Kentucky. You had the right colors.
Yeah. So what's the deal? Is it just like misevaluation, not enough investment? What's going on?
I think honestly a lot of it is personal preference of the defensive coordinator. Because right now, like on defense, and I think what makes me more impressed with the job they've done this year is they're in like a kind of a transition year in terms of like the fit and the body types that they have. Because last year, Dean Pease defense, like Arnold Ebiketie, he's kind of tailor made for something like that. A little bit smaller on the edge. For a team that's going to blitz a lot, play a lot of zone blitzes like Dean Pease did, and they got torched because the players were very good. But still, like you look at that and you're like, okay, Lorenzo Carter, D'Angelo Malone, Arnold Ebiketie, those are kind of like your standard 3-4 size outside linebackers. But think about the guys that the Saints went after when Ryan Nielsen was the defensive line coach there, like Cam Jordan, Marcus Davenport, Peyton Turner. These guys are like 6'5", huge guys. So, when he comes over here, I thought that what he wanted was pretty clear early on because, you go out, you sign Calais Campbell, who's gigantic. You get Zach Harrison, who is like a heavy-handed run-first guy, but they don't quite have the juice on the edge. And the interesting thing to me is I still think Ebiketie is probably their best edge rusher. He's only played about 38% of snaps this year. He still is second on the team in sacks with only 2.5, but still, like, he's someone that I think if you could kind of expand his role a little bit would probably be pretty helpful. But they seem a little bit stuck in their ways as far as like the body types they want on the edge. I mean, I don't know how much Falcons film you've watched, but dude, they like Calais Campbell on the edge in a 2-point stance it kind of hurts my soul a little bit.
Yeah,
even though
rough.
he's had some really, really strong moments as a run defender still. But the insistence on having him be like a primary edge defender for them on passing downs is a little bit frustrating for me. So, I think if they can just kind of get out of their own head a little bit and just play more to some of the guys they have available for them, there's chances for this pass rush to improve, but they still need to go out and get a guy because they haven't had like a truly, year in, year out dependable pass rusher since John Abraham. Like you had the 1 year of Vic Beasley, but John Abraham's the last guy. If you're really going to talk about, guys who made impact.
We both know that Vic Beasley's production was fake even before he fell off again, right? Like we both knew that wasn't.
Yeah, I knew it was fake, but I was still hoping like, okay, well maybe you can improve and become like an 8 to 10 sack guy. And then it turned out he didn't like football all that much, and it was over. So
who among us?
Like at least he can live out to his truth and say, I could be good at this, but I don't like it, so I'm not going to do this anymore.
How much would you wanted the Falcons to have given up for like Danielle Hunter?
I would have been comfortable in anything that wasn't a first because they need to hold on to those firsts to get a quarterback potentially. Like I was fine with the idea of them trading a second for Montez Sweat. I think it also makes sense that the Commanders chose the Bears' second-round pick instead of the Falcons' second-round pick, like just out of pure draft status. But like if you get into the spot where you're thinking about trading a first for a pass rusher, they're not quite there yet to pull a move like that. You got to get the quarterback situation solidified first.
Yeah, fair enough. Would you have wanted, like, what do you think of Danielle Hunter? Would you have wanted him on that team for like a second and change?
Hell yeah. Look at you've been crazy this year. They like I said, they haven't had pass rushers like that since I was in high school. I'm almost 30. So,
he's leading the league in sacks. It's going all right for him, I guess.
Right. I would imagine that he's going to get paid pretty handsomely pretty soon. I would have loved to have a guy like him. I would love to have a guy like Montez Sweat. And I think like when you're talking about guys the Falcons are targeting, those are probably the two because they fit the size requirements that, Nielsen and Terry Fontenot are starting to build towards. So it's it's like the Falcons defense is almost there. I think if they had even just one real edge rusher, like that would really send them over the roof in terms of what the ceiling of this defense can be. Because I think, outside of last week, AJ Terrell's had a pretty good season. Jesse Bates has been an absolute godsend at safety. Jeff
He's
Okuda's
good.
had a
Oh
nice
my
year.
god.
Yeah, yeah. Honestly, Jesse Bates was a guy like I was happy they signed him. I didn't know he was like this good. Or maybe he's having his best season so far in Atlanta.
Well, because
Um,
his best year at Cincinnati was like 2 years ago, right? So you're just kind of like, I don't know if he's ever going to be able to do that again, but he's good, and then he's
yeah,
turning in this season. Yeah,
yeah.
great.
So between like AJ Terrell, um, Jeff Okuda, Jesse Bates, like their third cornerback, D. Alford had a breakout year this year. Like the secondary it's the best secondary that I've seen them have probably since like 2017 when like Desmond Trufant and Robert Alford and Keanu Neal were all playing really good football for that
Man,
one season.
jeez.
Yeah. 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 Do you remember when Desmond Trufant was supposed to be like the next Revis back in like 2014?
Yeah, I remember when he was better than Xavier Rhodes. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
remember was
And then
happening.
it just never quite, and like once Dan Quinn got there, it was never quite the same, even though he had some strong moments. So I mean,
Amazing.
this is the best unit I think they've had in a long time. And they're even getting like some passable play out of linebackers. They lost Troy Anderson at the start of the year, which was frustrating because he was like if you go back to Troy Anderson's combine stuff, he's like one of the most freakishly athletic
Combine was
players to ever.
silly. Yeah,
Yeah, like you could put him at any position on like the little Raz site, and he would
dude,
show up
I
as
think
damn
I think
near.
we talked about this. We were like, what position would you play him at?
Yeah,
Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah. Well,
and
but like
you could
his deal was he wasn't picking up football, right? Like he was just playing like sandbox type defense. It was with Montana State or something like that. And so the
yeah. I
NFL
mean,
was going to be a weird transition for him.
he was a former quarterback, and like it showed on some of the Montana State stuff where he's reading things out right. He's flowing to the ball well. He's fast, and then an offensive lineman hits him, and it's over. Um, and even like early on in his rookie year, it was kind of the same stuff. But this year, when he pulls up at the starter next to Caden Ellis, like he looks so improved from where he was last year, and then he got hurt, and I don't remember if he's out for the year or not, but he's been out since the week 3 loss against the Lions. So that's been a big blow for them. But even though they lost him, like someone like Nate Landman has stepped up for them at linebacker too as an undrafted guy. Caden Ellis is still playing well. So to me, like when you have guys who are coming in and out of the lineup and the defensive efficiency still stays good, like you're doing something right on that side of the ball. And this is the first time that I can really ever remember, like since I've started watching the game and understanding what's going on, that the Falcons defense has been good and their offense has been bad because it's always been the opposite, like the
Yeah,
entire time. And now we're here in the spot that, um, I'm excited to watch their defense each week, which is a very foreign feeling.
that's crazy. Wait, so hold on. So who do they have? So it's just Caden Ellis and Nate Landman at linebacker. Who do they have? Are they going to promote somebody?
Well, they have other guys, but I don't really remember their name. Look it
That's
up
rough.
because Troy's been out for
Yeah.
like almost 2 months now. Tay Davis. Yeah, it's mainly just Caden and Nate Landman for the most
Uh,
part. But Nate, like for an undrafted guy, I think he's been a great find for them. But they still need to get Troy back in the lineup if he can get healthy before the end of the year.
fair enough. So we touched on the secondary super quick, but I just wanted to ask about the Jeff Okuda trade. 'Cause it sounded like Lions fans were like happy to see him go, which when that trade happened and they were happy, I was like kind of surprised because I thought he was like pretty talented. So I think I missed something there.
He,
But as
I was surprised. I was say I'm surprised they were happy to see him go too because like he played well for at least half the season with the Lions. It wasn't like it was a total disaster for him. Like it was either the first 8 games or the last 8 games that he played really well, and the other half wasn't great. I'm assuming based on the reaction, it was probably the first 8 games where he was good, and the last 8 games
yeah,
when he
that
wasn't
would make
playing that
sense. Yeah.
well. But ever since he's got here, he doesn't have to be the number one receiver. He's not traveling with guys like AJ Terrell does. So he gets to take on some lesser receiving assignments. And I think, for a guy like him, that's great because he might not be the fastest guy, but he's really strong, and that has helped him, kind of disrupt guys at the line of scrimmage and helped them make some tackles. So I think he's developed like the perfect number 2 for this defense, and I'm kind of interested to see like what contract they end up giving him after the season, because I'll be pretty surprised if he's not back next year.
Oh yeah. I guess because most of these trades usually occur with like an extension, but they didn't feel the need to extend them until they got like some understanding, right? So
yeah, because it was only a 5th round pick, so it's not like you have the the pressure to extend. Like the Bears are trying to figure out with this Montez Sweat situation.
yeah.
Did you see the Jeff Darlington, or not Jeff Darlington, Jeremy Fowler report, where he was like, Montez Sweat was basically ready to sign an extension with Atlanta the second that trade went through, but the Bears came with a better offer, and now he doesn't know what he wants to do anymore. So
oh man, that's wild.
yeah.
So I think that's it for the defense. Just super quick touching on special teams. 1, is Younghoe Koo the truth? 2, is Cordero Patterson still like a beastly kick returner? Are we happy about that, or are we just done with kick returns?
I don't really have any takes on Cordero Patterson as a kick returner. I kind of stopped paying attention last year after they put him in and he got the record. Now, honestly, this year this has been the first year where I think the age is starting to show a little bit on Cordero. Like,
it's like
you can see it.
Sense.
Yeah. But before this point, he kind of, there wasn't that much tread on the tire. So like he had been a great weapon for them the past couple of years, especially like when you're doing the bargain bin free agency stuff. I think getting someone like Cordero Patterson actually ended up being pretty huge for them. But at the same time, this year, you're starting to see 32, a little bit more tread on the tires. He was hurt to start the season, hasn't been nearly as explosive in the past. So, I think that's starting to come to an end. And kick returns, I don't really think he's done all that much there. Since he's returned 4 kicks for 89 yards this year, so not even really the primary guy.
Yeah.
Dude, I don't. Okay, if you get a chance, I'm not sure how much you see of that Titans game from last weekend, but they just had like so many special teams errors, and they were all like unforced returning stuff. Where there was 2 times where Mike Hughes, another former Viking, he returned. He tried to field a punt like inside the 5-yard line twice, and barely made it back to like the 15. So you have 2 drives starting there, and then there was another one where, out of nowhere, it's like this was a kickoff, right? It's not even a punt, and the ball was headed out of bounds, and out of nowhere, Keith Smith, the fullback, who's like playing an up back on kickoff return, runs out of nowhere and makes like an insane catch over his shoulder right as the ball's about to go out of bounds. Like, dude, what the hell are you doing?
You don't gotta do that.
What do you do? Yeah, so then he catches the ball, and then he turns around and he's like, "Oh wait, I'm a fullback," and he gets tackled like immediately with the ball. So, yes, like you have to look it up. There were 3 returns that they had major brain farts on, where all of a sudden
Mike Hughes has done that before. That is familiar to Vikings fans. But
so he did it twice. He did it twice in that game and got replaced as the punt returner by Scotty Miller. And then they had Keith Smith doing his little, his brain fart after that. So, it's even stuff like that where now we have to drive 90 yards to score a touchdown instead of, 75, which is a pretty significant difference. So yeah, they're just doing dumb stuff. And as far as Koo, I think he's still good. I feel like sometimes I feel like he misses pivotal kicks, but that's just more anecdotal stuff. Like, he's only really had 1 down year since he's been here, and that was last year, and he's already rebounded, pretty nicely. He's 16 for 17. Not too much you can ask for more than that.
Fair enough. Most of the times people talk about like smart play on kickoff returns. It's like when you catch like really close to the sideline and you make sure that you're out of bounds at the moment you catch it. Like that's smart stuff, and that's like the exact opposite what Keith Smith is doing. That's crazy.
Yeah. Also, you're Keith Smith. Like, you should never be trying to field a kick unless
what are you doing?
Unless it's like it's like a pooch kick that goes straight towards you, and you're calling the fair catch in like a 30, and that's it. but like you should never be trying to make an over the shoulder kickoff return catch, turning back around and face the defense and getting tackled immediately. For what?
I mean, the Falcons had to find a way to beat the Falcons, I guess.
Yeah, every week there's something. And I think the most Falcons thing this week would be to let Jaren Hall dice you up and you lose the game.
What do you think about Jaren Hall?
I have never seen him play before.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, he wasn't one of the quarterbacks that I got to when I was doing draft scouting stuff. I think I got to who was drafted this year? It's like I got past Will Levis,
Hendon Hooker.
Yeah, I think Hendon Hooker was probably like the lowest ranked quarterback that I got through Tanner McKee. So
yeah, I was about to ask if you got the Stanford guy. Yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah, so I watched Bryce Young, CJ, Anthony Levis, Hooker, Tanner McKee, and I quit at Tanner because I was like, all right, if someone's worse than this, then I don't really need to see much more.
Did I tell you what Tanner McKee said at the combine when people asked him what separated him from the other quarterbacks?
No.
He said, "I'm bigger than them."
I mean, it's not wrong. Bigger than all of them except Anthony Richardson. Like,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah. That was just a wild answer from a quarterback. I never heard that in my life.
Yeah.
All right, man. I think the Falcons are favored by like 2.5. I don't know. There's something.
It's embarrassing.
What do you think? Who's winning by how much? What's your guess?
Excuse me. I think this is actually going to be a fairly low scoring game. I think I'll go Falcons 17-13.
Yeah, cool. Sounds good. All right, thanks for coming on, man. Tell people where they can find you.
You can find me on Twitter at 4Verts. You can find my work at Yahoo Sports. You can find my podcast, The Exempt List, on the Zero Blitz podcast feed. That's everywhere you get your podcasts. Take a listen. I'm sure we'll have a replay, before too long. So yeah, please listen to that stuff, read our stuff, because I would like to keep doing this job, and it's imperative that people click on the stuff so we can keep doing this stuff.
Chuck is one of the smartest football minds that refuses to use his smart football mind to cover football. I love him. I love his work.
That's right. Well, I save it for when I actually get in front of people to talk to them.
That's fair.
Like Twitter's just Twitter. But like when I go to interview people and I'm going to practice, I'll use my football brain to kind of cut some corners as far as like building relationships goes. But Twitter's Twitter. And honestly, I used to post a lot more film on Twitter, but I had a streak. This was a couple years ago. I had a streak where I was getting crazy DMCA stuff where they're telling me to delete dozens worth of tweets or else my account was going to get shut down. So I kind of got spooked there because honestly, I need my account to like network with people and talk with people. So as much as I like posting film and sharing film with people on the internet, it's not quite worth it to me to lose my account over that. So I got a little spooked, but
people like sometimes just have film burner accounts where they just have a second account.
Yeah,
and then they retweet it. No, it's too much work. All right.
I'm not going to do that. Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks so much for coming on. Follow Chuck. Click on his links multiple times if you can. Commit click fraud for him. Download his stuff. At 4Verts. Thanks, man.
Yeah. Thanks.
And let's get into the mailbag. First question is from Luke Braun's dad, who asks, let's say Dobbs is a Hyundai. Did the Vikings basically steal him from the Cardinals?
God, Jesus. First of all, I received nothing in return for my Hyundai. Let's be clear. So,
you're actually under on the loan, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. They say like the term they use is underwater. That seems like so much more dire than it actually is. Like, yeah, I've got a couple of extra loan payments to pay off. It sucks, but like I'm not drowning. Right? That's crazy.
Well, not yet.
Not yet.
There's still a little bit more left in the year.
Yeah, but like the thieves did not toss a quarter at me while they were like driving the car away. Like I didn't get anything. I didn't get a late round pick. I didn't get change. I didn't get a half-eaten sandwich. The Vikings got something, right? They got a pick swap, a pretty minor one, but they still got one. So, it's not quite like a Hyundai. No. Also, I feel like there's no epidemic of Joshua Dobbs thefts, as far as I'm aware.
This is a one-time thing. It's not, the
Well, it's
city
two.
of
He got traded
Milwaukee.
twice this season. It is
Oh.
twice, in fairness. But yeah.
Yeah. There was some report that he just got all his furniture down to Arizona, and now he's in Minnesota.
Amazing.
Yeah. Numerophile asks, much is being made of Dobbs being a literal rocket scientist, and it's absolutely cool, but do you think him being actually smart actually improves his ability to pick up a new offense quickly?
So one thing I've learned over the years is if you're smart at a thing, brilliant at a thing, that doesn't like make you smart at other stuff, right? Like that's like fairly well documented. There are people with PhDs in legitimately at legitimately accredited universities in very challenging fields, at least as we contemporarily understand them, that when they kind of cross over into some other area of life, not particularly smart. If I can get just a tiny bit political, I don't know if anyone remembers Ben.
I don't even know if you need to do that. It's just the idea that like they have their doctorate in one area. They've done very well in one area and have ignored knowledge in every other.
Yeah, which you have to.
Yeah.
Because you're creating legitimately new knowledge that has never happened before. But I do want to get this example out, James. Ben Carson is legitimately one of like a brilliant neurosurgeon. Like he has done a lot to advance the field of neurosurgery, right? Literal brain surgeon, right? And I gotta say, personal opinion, who knows? Not the brightest bulb at a bunch of other stuff. He's got like basic facts wrong very consistently. Whenever you see a conspiracy theory, especially medical conspiracy theories, and this has nothing to do with COVID, don't worry. A lot of times, like the books that are written about them have like Nobel laureates signed on to them. And you look them up and it's like, oh, this guy thinks that HIV doesn't cause AIDS. And he's got like 40 Nobel laureates signed on. And not one of them has like a biology degree. Like this guy won a Nobel Prize in physics. And now he thinks that AIDS is a lie caused by anti-AIDS drugs. Like, okay. Like and this happens all the time. So yeah, I would say that, it doesn't necessarily translate over. I remember when the Ryan Fitzpatrick Harvard stuff, was much more popular, right? Because there was a moment like late in Fitzmagic's career that they stopped talking about the Harvard stuff and they just started talking about like, doesn't he look cool in sunglasses? Look at this guy, right? Like I think that's what it turned into. Which fair, that's much better discourse. But you kind of got the impression that he would play like a precision quarterback, right? Like somebody who would be kind of methodical, kind of the stereotype that we had at the time of, veteran smart quarterbacks, Peyton Manning's and Tom Brady's, who didn't always like throw it deep all the time. And Fitzmagic was like, absolutely not. If I have a shadow of a chance to throw it deep, that sucker is flying, right? Like he just didn't play like the stereotype. And obviously he didn't turn out to be the world's best quarterback, but he turned out to be much better than I think a lot of people thought. And so maybe you kind of get this understanding, but there's a lot of quarterbacks that are good at football knowledge on the whiteboard. Christian Ponder, Joey Harrington, both remarkable on the whiteboard and not particularly fast processors on the field, right? And it's kind of like with Josh Dobbs, the aerospace engineer thing is legitimately super interesting. I think it's so cool, but that's all it is, right? Like if he was a firefighter, that's really cool. But that's how relevant it is. It's just like, oh, it's a firefighter. That's awesome, man. Great, dude. But it has very little in terms of crossover. This is like a problem in intelligence studies, which itself is like a field full of it. The field probably kind of shouldn't exist the way it does. But there's like, the way that people study intelligence, it used to be for a long time that we just kind of assumed that there was a unifying factor that was in the background of all intelligence. So if you were good at spatial reasoning, there was a good chance you'd be good at mathematical reasoning. There'd be a good chance you'd be good at like reading comprehension or whatever, right? And that's true, but not for the reasons that people seem to think. They called it like generalized factor or G, right? And that was why people took IQ tests, because they could approximate G by IQ tests. And it turns out that actually it's crazy flawed. And if you are capable in one type of mental activity, you are not. There's a very low risk, given kind of socioeconomic conditions, that you'd be very good at other kinds of what we would call some sort of intellectual activity. So no, but the good news is that Dobbs does seem to be a fairly quick processor on the field. Sometimes he moves a little bit too fast in terms of getting off of his first read, but he assesses the situation very quickly, and he does pick up playbooks really quickly. Like he started for Arizona like right away after he was traded from Cleveland, and that they're different playbooks, right? And my understanding is in Pittsburgh, it was kind of the same thing. He picked up a playbook very quickly, was able to apply it, which is another thing, was able to apply it. They didn't need him to because they had Big Ben, but you could apply it really quickly too. So yeah, that has nothing to do with anything, but in terms of his quarterback traits, some of that stuff kind of lines up. Again, he's very aggressive, so sometimes it looks like he'll be making bad decisions, but he's actually fully aware of the type of decision that he wants to make. Which I don't know if you would count that as misreading a defense, but that's something to kind of keep in mind.
Zach Wilson asks, not that Zach Wilson.
Not that.
And not actually Zach Wilson at all.
Yeah, he's frankly. Not. Yeah, he said that like, oh, you got my name wrong.
Yeah, turns out it's Zach Dixon, and I just put Zach Wilson. If he didn't want to be called Zach Wilson, he clearly shouldn't have been born with the first name Zach. How much does it actually affect an opponent when they have no tape on their opposing quarterback? Seems like it historically affects the Vikings a lot, but that also just seems like it might be a Vikings thing. Yours truly, Zach Wilson. Now I'm getting mixed signals.
Yeah. Now I don't know. So that's actually, I wouldn't say that's historically a Vikings thing. Yeah, the backup quarterback thing is kind of a problem. When you break down the numbers, the Vikings are like very slightly worse than average against backup quarterbacks. We just remember the ones where they fell flat on their face, whether that was Cooper Rush or one of the 3 times they faced backup Andy Dalton. Literally only one of the 3 times. Or the Chase Daniel. Like we remember those, but like they did do a number on a couple of other backup quarterbacks. Plus, when that guy is a rookie, historically, and this is mostly a Zimmer thing, right? But historically, the Vikings just laid waste to the guy, right? And they didn't have a ton of film on him, whether or not he was supposed to be a starter or a backup. So I wouldn't say it's because they had a lack of film on a guy. I think that it's just you prepare for one playing style and you get another. But with a rookie, we've asked Zimmer about this like a number of times, and he seems kind of surprised at the question. He's like, yeah, we don't have a lot of film on the guy, but that's not going to stop us. We know who the coordinator is. We have a backlog of everything they do offensively, and we've got a ton of college film on him, and we know kind of everything they do offensively. And so we can kind of get an understanding of like, how the ball travels in the air, how quickly he makes checks at the line, kind of what the offense is trying to do, what kind of tells you're trying to get. So, yeah, you have to do a little bit of different type of work and cobble stuff together instead of just looking at the last 4 games that somebody played. But for the most part, it doesn't seem to be that big of a problem. Plus, the Vikings do have, in this case, they're playing Taylor Heineke. They do have like a fairly institutional knowledge of Taylor Heineke, right? He was here. And so I'm sure that'll play a role too. Maybe, I don't know if any players were teammates with him, maybe Harrison Smith, right? But, even if there weren't any players that were teammates, you've got like tons of practice footage to work off of. That's like the Vikings just have it. So in this case, it's even less of a concern, even if he is in a new offense.
Kevin asks, how would you evaluate the younger players on our defense so far?
I mostly positive. We can go through it really quickly, like player by player. I'll just make an arbitrary determination by who I think is young. At some point, I'll pick somebody who's like older than Danielle Hunter, but not Danielle Hunter, just because It seems like he's been here forever, but that's fine. Ivan Pace, really great. Hasn't seen a lot of snaps recently because the Vikings have been doing a lot of dime stuff or a lot of penny fronts or whatever. And so you don't see a ton of Ivan Pace out there. It's almost always Jordan Hicks, but what we've seen is pretty good. It's very clear he's got limitations, both in terms of size and in terms of coverage, but mostly just very positive. Brian Asamoah, we haven't seen him a ton either. Very similar reasons. He is on the injury report right now. I think that I guess is a disappointment, but mostly not because of the pick investment, third round pick 2 years ago, but because of the way the Vikings talked about him going into the offseason and the expectations from the end of last year about him. So I guess that would be kind of disappointing. Let's see. Caleb Evans outplaying his 4th round draft capital, but I think it's pretty clear he's not like a top end cornerback, but he's like pretty good as a second corner. That's like a really nice asset to have like that. Josh Metellus playing out of his mind. Good Lord, he's playing so well. Cameron Bynum, even better. Holy, he might be the best player in the secondary right now. I mean, like I know Harrison Smith is right there, but like Cameron Bynum is just out of this world right now. So that's really nice. So yeah, I guess mostly positive, but I am talking about the guys that were able to start. So, if you ask me about like Lewis C, and I think we all know the answer to that. Jay Ward hasn't played a ton, hasn't earned a ton of playing time. Mekhi Blackman, very up and down, also has not earned a ton of playing time. Andre Carter, what's he doing here? I don't know. He's not, he's not active most of the games. So, Jaquelin Roy, he's played like 5-6 snaps, like 2 snaps in one game, 3 snaps in another game. I don't know. The snaps I'm seeing are pretty good. That's nice, but there's probably a reason he's behind like Dean Lowry, right? So, for the most part, the young players on the defense, given that there is a selection bias here, are pretty good. But, Andrew Booth, despite the one game where he looked kind of good, mostly a disappointment. Lewis Cine, mostly a disappointment. So Brian Asamoah might be a disappointment, ? I don't know. So, yeah.
Next question is from Evan Creed, who asks, for this week against Heineke, does Hunter need to change his kick the door down sack celebration to call a locksmith and patiently wait celebration? Boy, that's a deep dive.
That's good. Well, I told Charles the story because he hadn't heard it. So if you listen to the interview, you got the story. But yeah, you got to. I think you got to do the double door kick, right? You got to make sure that DJ Wadham's on board and that you synchronize it.
Yep. just go further. That's all you got this year. A Hyundai for one of us is a Hyundai for all of us. Asks, will this Kirktober be the one that forever lives in infamy? Was it possible that Kirktober could have lasted 3 months?
The endless summer, yeah. It was possible. It was possible. We were treated to an early Kirktober. Remember, most Kirktobers began in Kirkvember. So keep that in mind, is that, it's kind of like Oktoberfest in Germany, starts in September. We were treated to a bit of an early one, but I think that, the hope was that he would combine the stuff from, 2 years ago and the stuff from last year into one cohesive quarterback. And he was like doing it. And then the receivers were just dropping the ball a ton. So you didn't like get to see the results of it. But I think this one will live in infamy for sure, especially if he doesn't like throw a pass again, right? Like for the Vikings or ever, but I'm confident he'll throw another pass in the NFL. But like if the Vikings don't extend him, which by the way that Kevin O'Connell is talking about him, it almost seems like a certainty that they will. But in the world that they don't, 100%. I mean, it's the way people talk about Teddy's preseason, except we have actual games against NFL teams with starters that you can point to instead of just saying, yeah, you should have seen training camp, which is just a lot less compelling. You had to be there is the way the Teddy stories go.
Drew McGarry's Jamboree had an awesome opening on what it's been like over the last couple of years to cheer for Kirk Cousins, and is absolutely worth checking out over at The Defector. It really summed up the experience of being a Vikings fan, trying your best to grin and bear it through the Kirk Cousins years. And the description of Kirk Cousins giving a smile is always gold.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, 100%.
Speaking of which, pessimistic Minnesota sports fan asks, realistically, what is the market for Cousins next year? Is there anyone who will give a 35-year-old coming off a torn Achilles starter money and any sort of term? Is there a scenario where he signs a shorter deal with the Vikings at a cheaper rate to rehab and come back to a familiar offense to try to show the league he can still play? A little show me deal.
So I don't see any reason that if he could, he wouldn't come back to the Vikings. The familiar offense thing, whatever. He's like, I think he even said it, that he wanted to be a one team quarterback. Obviously that didn't work out. So now he's a 2-team quarterback, but he kind of wants to keep it, in Minnesota. He's also like family related reasons too, right? He's got his family here and his kids are going to school. But I think that would be kind of the ideal thing. But I don't think that there's going to be a lot of stuff preventing him from signing a long-term deal. Obviously, like, it's not remotely comparable, but like Peyton Manning in 2011, when he missed that season, signing on with the Denver Broncos in 2012 after like this extended tour where a bunch of teams were like, yeah, we can give you like 5 years fully guaranteed. What about it? No problem. Why not? Your neck doesn't work, we can work around that. You're Peyton Manning, right? Like, the injury stuff only matters if a guy has an injury that's so catastrophic that you're just like, yeah, I don't know about this. Like with Teddy, right? Or if the guy is like a marginal starting talent and you're like, well, I don't want to risk it. James, before the show, you mentioned Sam Bradford signing with the Arizona Cardinals. His injuries were so numerous, and also with the Vikings numerous, right? But so numerous throughout his career that he was just kind of seen as a liability, and his knee had gotten so bad that it would just swell up and not be usable. And so it's kind of a surprise the Cardinals signed him, but then the contract details of that were very generous to the Cardinals. They were like, yeah, it's a per game thing. And so if you're not active on game day, here's a good chunk of money you're just not getting. So it wasn't guaranteed. I think the best example of a quarterback that I don't know if a model is a good one, but a quarterback that got a fairly long-term deal, relatively speaking, on the free market, despite injury concerns, would be Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Who just got benched for Aiden O'Connell, but he signed a $72 million deal, or it was with extensions at $72 million, but the total, I think, in terms of just new money was like 35 million, 34 million over the course of 3 years or something. If you don't include like this year's money. But yeah, I mean, he had 34 million fully guaranteed. I believe he had a rolling guarantee for another 11 million. And so he had like 50 total guaranteed, I think, in his contract, which is not wonderful in terms of quarterback contracts. But I think that Cousins has played better than Garoppolo, has had significantly less alarming injuries. It's just the one thing, right? And an Achilles is not a small thing, but Garoppolo's had so many injuries in his career that I think that Cousins has a better argument that, maybe he's coming back from an ankle or a knee in a way that's a little bit easier to come back from, and I'm coming back from an Achilles. But first of all, the Achilles, I'm not Richard Sherman. It's not a huge part of my game to have to run on every down, right? Because Richard Sherman's after the Achilles was like a pretty big deal. But I think that's going to be part of it. So I think that he will be able to sign a 3-year deal somewhere. Now, he wants full guarantees. Honestly, he's a quarterback who's just played some pretty good football. I think he'd get them. I don't think he'll be able to command the $40 million that he wanted from the Vikings or the $40 million that Daniel Jones got. But I think he'd be able to get something close to that, relatively fully guaranteed. So, yeah, I know that it seems kind of weird and murky, but he is a quarterback. The athleticism is not that important. Obviously, you have to drive down on that foot in order to generate arm strength. So it's not nothing, but it's not that important, relatively speaking. And he'll have a full offseason of recovery.
Next question is from Nolan Kaler, who asks, for North Code, how long will it take the Vikings to regret not acquiring BC Lions standout Nathan Rourke when we dealt Ezra Cleveland?
So I Googled Nathan Rourke before the show. I had like an inkling that he was a quarterback, but the way that this had question been worded was that he was like maybe a guard, and I was like, he hasn't sent in a question about a CFL guard. That can't be right. I googled him. Yeah, he's like a 6'1". I mean, he's killing it, absolutely killing it in the CFL. He's like a 6'1", 210-pound quarterback. Good, great, good. I think the Vikings are fine. I think they're okay.
They're not going to miss out on this one.
I mean, sure, maybe he signs on with an NFL team in 2 years, and then I'm going to eat those words. But for now, I'm pretty comfortable with this.
Like so much poutine at a sushi joint. The Real Jack asks, for a Reef's Magic, The Gathering corner, given that we've established Cousins and Kevin O'Connell as running blue and white, how is it possible that they didn't have a counterspell ready in the event of a catastrophe like a blown Achilles? Was he just mana tapped that late into the fourth quarter? Troubling.
Concerning. Looking into it. Okay. I am losing track of all the bits and corners. I'm going to assume that I said, I'm going to characterize this as the truth, that I don't know much about Magic the Gathering. I've never played it or picked it up or had a shoebox full of Magic the Gathering cards or 3 shoeboxes full of Magic the Gathering cards. Certainly haven't bought them from a comic book store or anything like that. So I can only answer based on hearsay and what people tell me about the color system. I think I did say that they would run a blue and white deck. I totally forgot why. But yeah, my understanding of blue is that it's very annoying to play against. So that sounds about right. And blue-white is apparently a pretty common color combination because it's very defensive because of counter spells and heals and protection wards and whatnot. And so why wouldn't they have a counter spell ready? And they might be playing a very old version of Magic the Gathering where so again, this is just hearsay. I have no Magic the Gathering lore in my head, but before there was a rule changing Magic the Gathering, there was a type of card called an interrupt. And interrupts were faster than instants. The way that Magic the Gathering works, again, hearsay, is that when you play a spell, every card is a spell except for a land. And maybe I'm missing a detail here. That maybe an artifact is a spell or not. But every card is a spell. So when you summon a creature that's summoning, that's a spell. You can cast spells. There can be enchantments that you can only cast on your turn that are permanent, whatever, right? But there are, based off of those spells, based off the type of spell it is, there's a speed at which the spell is played. And so you can only play, when someone else places an enchantment, you can play an instant even if it's not your turn. So if, for example, someone summons a creature, you can counterspell it by playing the spell Counterspell, which happens at in instant speed. So that's the fastest speed in modern Magic the Gathering. You can counter instants with other instants, but in previous versions of Magic the Gathering, you could also counter them with interrupts. And interrupts could not be countered by instants because they were faster. So you would need an interrupt type in order to counter an interrupt. Again, I know nothing about Magic the Gathering. This is just bits and pieces I'm picking up from the background of other people talking about it. And it could be the case that the cards that were played to give Cousins an Achilles injury, which now that I'm saying it out loud sounds like very trivializing, but fine, whatever. That's where we're at right now. Could have been an interrupt. And Kevin O'Connell's a very new school coach, so maybe he doesn't have access to older cards or didn't understand the rule set that they were playing by and didn't have a counterspell that could be deployed at the speed of an interrupt. So that might be what happened, because it would boggle my mind that they wouldn't have enough land available to tap mana to play a counterspell. And certainly they wouldn't only have 4 counterspell type cards in their deck or anything like that. It's full of counterspells. That's what the deck is for. So again, my credulity is metered by the fact that I've been doing research for this question specifically.
Yeah, I can say, as somebody who records all the pre-show stuff, that you spent almost an hour researching this topic and just making sure that you were giving out the correct information.
Right. Yeah, my lack of familiarity was a real problem for this, for sure.
Your geekiness is getting in the way of your nerdiness again. Logan Bull Sharif asks our final question. Question for James and Arif's Halloween Corner. What previous or former bosses would be most likely to fire you if you dressed as them for Halloween, and what would that outfit look like?
I think honestly I should have done that last year for Pro Football Network, because Adam Beasley, my editor, would have loved it. So that would have been a good move. Prior to that, I don't know. I don't think any of my editors would have been that upset. I suppose I could have, like, at the Athletic, I could have dressed up like just a general tech bro, right? And so I'd be dressing up like the CEO. But that's, I mean, they were a startup, right? So that's not like a pointed criticism or anything like that. But I don't think I've had bosses where they would be upset if I dressed up like them. A lot of times, because like, what did they dress up? They're just like, they're basically writers, right? Like what did they dress up as? There's nothing distinctive about any of them. And when I was working in politics, I don't think I had bosses that dressed it up distinctly enough that I could dress up like them for Halloween. So I just don't have a great answer to this.
I accidentally dressed up like my boss on Halloween once. And people thought that it was intentional. It was absolutely not. I was working at Amazon at the time, so geez, we're talking like 20 years ago. And my boss, who is turned into a long-term friend, had a very distinctive look, and I forget if I had like gone to lunch with my girlfriend earlier in the day, or if I was gonna go afterwards. But I'd done like a khaki thing, which I never did, and then a couple other things. But I showed up looking like he did. He showed up. We did the whole somebody should have called ahead sort of thing, and then because people dressed up that day for Halloween, we got entered into the Halloween contest dressed up as him, and I was like, fine. If I win this, it's gonna be even better. I once dressed up like my team lead at Amazon, and it was odd. It was an odd sensation. He thought it was hilarious. Was a little confused, but because I'd never made any sort of comment to him like that before. So
right, yeah.
Why start now? I don't think I have another boss that I have one boss in my history I could have dressed up as, but it would have been even like weirder than accidentally doing it. So I think that's what I got. I can't think of anything else that I would have dressed up as that would have potentially gotten me fired and ruined my attempt at taking Vegas for the money that I gave them earlier this year. Mark Davis, if I ever see you at an Ultra Cuts, I'm going to give you a piece of my mind. Let me tell you what. Ugh. And with that is going to be the end of this episode of Norse Code. Arif, what do you have to plug? And did you actually write it or did you steal it?
Oh, I stole it 100%. And it is behind a paywall. And the people I stole it from, I did not pay for. What I'm referring to is the Joshua Dobbs article, where I asked a bunch of people like, hey, you watch quarterbacks for a living, and your opinion, people pay to see it. Can I just have it? And then they just gave it to me, and then I put it in my publication. And you just go to wildleftpost.substack.com, and the article is titled actually I should get the title right. The article is titled "The Minnesota Vikings Trade for Joshua Dobbs." I asked a bunch of people who paid for their opinion on quarterbacks and stole them, or something like that. I asked a bunch of people about him and stole their opinions. That was it. So you check that out. That article is done really well. So I'm going to be more forthright in my article titles going forward, because that seems to play.
We are entering the world of the literal titles for things involving episodes and involving articles on the page on the website.
Yeah. So yeah. No, but it was I did put like a lot of work into it, so it's not as if I just copied and pasted and that was the end of the article. But yeah, I talked to people about his strengths, his weaknesses, what an offense might look like under him. I tried to validate what they were saying using some of the analytical data that we have. available to us now, which as I was going through it, like compiling all the Josh Dobbs analytics and stuff, I was like struck by just how much more data we have access to now than 10 years ago. So that was nice. But yeah, so you can find that there. Also have obviously a recap of the game where the recap was more a meditation on what it means to be a Vikings fan. I mentioned that earlier. And then I've been doing a ton of like random other work, so I couldn't get a third article out this week. I am going to be doing some stuff for Bolts from the Blue for the next couple of weeks, just because Michael Peterson, who we had as a guest on from Bolts from the Blue to preview the Chargers, he is on paternity leave, so congrats to him. I'm going to be taking up a couple of like the game recaps for the Chargers and stuff like that. So if you want me to read, if you want to read game recaps about two teams that you don't follow, for sure head over to boltsfromtheblue.com and read what they're going to play, like the Jets. That sounds fascinating. You should head over there after the Jets Chargers game on Monday night and read that.
Yeah,
for sure. I'm so good at selling this.
You're a consummate showman. That's exactly what this is. That's what this is all about. People are just trying to steal from you all the time, but you are a consummate showman. Good stuff.
That's what they say.
That is what they say. That is it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, The Damn Grill, our Denver live show, 7 p.m., November 17th. Check us out. For a Reef, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll be back next week. And please remember to just put that in a garage next time. And we will be back next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan of Pro Football Network, and he can be found at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can do so in a few different ways. You can go to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there. For $3.50 a month, you get bonus material and more. You can also go to paypal.me/NorseCode for a one-time donation, or you can go to norsecode.threadless.com and pick up some Norse Code merchandise. Any questions or comments that cannot fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this.
Hey, all things are possible through the power of Ben DiNucci.